So, Sophie Cunningham, it happened again. The WNBA have fined her again. They fined her again. And
DeWanna Bonner disappeared like a ghost.
Sophie Cunningham has now been fined 4 times this season.
DeWanna Bonner said, see ya.
Apparently she got fined $1,500 her first week.
Was it not for her saying the refs need to protect Caitlin Clark?
Sophie Cunningham just got hit with another massive fine from the WNBA. And you're not going to believe what she said this time that sent the league into absolute chaos. We're talking about a player who's literally been fined twice for simply speaking the truth about what's happening to Caitlin Clark. And now the entire basketball world is losing their minds over this latest development. This story is so insane, so filled with drama and controversy that it's got fans creating petitions, teammates choosing sides, and the WNBA scrambling to control a narrative that's completely spiraling out of their hands. Trust me when I say this. What I'm about to tell you will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about professional women's basketball.
We were talking about, like, our first week, what people had to say. Well, the WNBA fined me.
No! You got fined for episode 1?
Dude, they fined me $1,500. I'm like, what? I'm like, this is just the beginning.
Apparently she got fined $1,500 her first week.
They fined her again.
She left her teammates in the dark. She left her teammates just like us, wondering what the heck is going on.
Let me paint you the full picture of how we got here. Because this isn't just about one fine or one player. This is about a system that's trying desperately to silence anyone who dares to speak up for fairness and player safety. Sophie Cunningham, who many of you know as a straight-shooting player who doesn't sugarcoat anything, decided to start a podcast during her first week in the league this season. She thought she was just going to share some behind-the-scenes insights, maybe give fans a different perspective on the game they love. What she didn't expect was to get absolutely hammered with a $1,500 fine that knocked her socks off.
And what's pretty wild, and I made this comment because I shared, she has come out, she's been fined again, by the way, by the WNBA because she made comments criticizing when she told them and talked about getting fined for this on her podcast.
Oh, way. I'm glad that you saved that for this and didn't text me, because that's unreal. I mean, it's like, it's cool for the pod, but that's kind of a bummer. Do they, when you get fined, do they put like verbatim, like quote here, like this is why you're being fined and this is why it's this much? Or is it like, hey, quit talking shit on us, Venmo us like $1,500?
No. What happens is they email our GM. And she pulls me aside and she goes, come here, Soph, I have to talk to you. And this was in like front of everybody. And I was like, what did I do now? And she just smiled and she goes, hey, they're going to fine you again. They're like, I was like, I even told them, I even credited them that their job was hard. I did say that. And I said that I would not be good at it. I did say that. Like, look at the whole picture. What are we doing?
Now, Sophie had mentally prepared herself for maybe a $500 slap on the wrist, thinking the league might not love her candid commentary. But $1,500? That's triple what she expected, and it sent a crystal clear message from the WNBA brass. We don't want you talking, especially when it comes to referee performance and especially when it involves their golden goose, Caitlin Clark. The fine came down like a hammer because Sophie had the audacity to speak openly about how the refs were handling games. And apparently, that's a big no-no in the WNBA's playbook. But here's where Sophie Cunningham shows she's made of different stuff than your average player who might back down and apologize. Instead of tucking her tail between her legs and promising to be a good little soldier, Sophie doubled down hard. She looked at that fine, looked at the message the league was trying to send, and essentially said, you know what? I'm going to keep speaking the truth no matter what it costs me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about principle, about standing up for what's right even when it hurts your bank account. And speaking of standing up for what's right, Sophie didn't stop there. She turned her attention to something that had been eating at her and frankly should have been eating at every Indiana Fever fan. The absolutely unprofessional way Dana Bonner handled her departure from the team. We're talking about a situation that left teammates completely blindsided. fans confused and angry, and the entire organization dealing with unnecessary drama during what should have been a season of celebration with Caitlin Clark joining the roster. Sophie didn't hold back when describing how Bonner just vanished from the team without so much as a goodbye text to her teammates. No explanation, no farewell message, no acknowledgement of the bonds that are supposed to exist between players who fought together on the court. Sophie was absolutely incredulous about this lack of basic professional courtesy, and she made it clear that this kind of behavior damages team morale and shows a complete disregard for the family atmosphere that teams work so hard to build. The situation with Bonner was particularly frustrating because, according to Sophie, there was behind-the-scenes maneuvering happening that left the rest of the team completely in the dark. Players were finding out about major roster changes through social media and news reports, instead of from their own teammate or coaching staff. Sophie positioned herself as the truth teller in this situation, the one willing to shine a light on what really happened when everyone else wanted to just move on quietly. But wait, it gets even more ridiculous. After Sophie received that first hefty fine, she did what any normal person might do. She mentioned it during her podcast, probably thinking she was just being transparent with her audience about the consequences of speaking up. Wrong move, according to the WNBA. They hit her with another fine just for mentioning that she had been fined in the first place. Let that sink in for a moment. Sophie Cunningham got fined for talking about being fined. The absurdity of the situation is almost too much to believe, but it perfectly illustrates just how far the league is willing to go to control their players' voices. This is where things get really spicy, because Sophie's most controversial moment came when she made what she considered to be a completely reasonable and factual statement about referees needing to protect Caitlin Clark. Now, anyone who's been watching WNBA games this season knows that Clark has been taking some absolutely brutal hits on the court, the kind of contact that would have refs throwing flags in other sports. Sophie simply pointed out that the officials need to do their job and protect all players, including the league's biggest rising star. The league's reaction to this comment was swift and harsh, proving Sophie's point about their aggressive stance toward anyone who dares to criticize officiating, especially when it involves their most marketable player. It's almost like the WNBA was more concerned about appearing to show favoritism toward Clark than they were about ensuring fair and consistent officiating across the board. Sophie's willingness to face financial consequences for making this statement became a rallying cry for fans who felt the same way about the officiating inconsistencies they were seeing. What made Sophie's criticism particularly powerful was the balanced way she approached it. She acknowledged that being a referee is an incredibly difficult job, that these officials are human beings trying to make split-second decisions in high-pressure situations. But she also refused to accept that this difficulty should excuse consistently poor performance or dangerous non-calls that put players at risk. This wasn't some angry rant from a bitter player. This was constructive criticism from someone who genuinely cares about the integrity and safety of the game. The public backlash against the league's handling of Sophie's comments was immediate and intense. Social media exploded with fans pointing out the hypocrisy of fining a player for words, while seemingly ignoring the physical targeting that Caitlin Clark was experiencing on the court. The double standard was glaring. Verbal criticism gets punished with financial penalties, but actual physical aggression that could end careers gets a pass or maybe a technical foul at most. This controversy transformed Sophie from just another player with opinions into a symbol of player advocacy and transparency. Her willingness to speak up about Dana Bonner's unprofessional departure, to defend Caitlin Clark's right to fair treatment, and to face repeated fines for her honesty turned her into something the league probably never expected. A folk hero for fans frustrated with WNBA politics and double standards. The timing of all this drama couldn't have been more significant for the Indiana Fever. With Caitlin Clark injured and unable to play, the team needed someone to keep their narrative alive, to remind fans why this season mattered and why the organization deserved support despite the chaos. Sophie stepped into that role naturally, using her podcast and social media presence to maintain engagement and transparency during a difficult period. What's particularly striking about Sophie's approach is how she's managed to support multiple causes simultaneously. She's defending Caitlin Clark from unfair treatment, she's holding teammates accountable for professional standards, she's criticizing league policies that silence player voices, and she's doing it all while facing personal financial consequences. This isn't someone looking for attention or trying to stir up drama for clicks. This is someone who genuinely believes in doing the right thing regardless of the cost. The Dana Bonner situation provided a perfect example of Sophie's commitment to professional standards and team unity. When Bonner left without any communication or courtesy toward her teammates, Sophie could have stayed quiet and avoided controversy. Instead, she chose to highlight how this kind of behavior damages team culture and disrespects the bonds that make successful teams work. She emphasized that in the WNBA, teammates become family, and walking away without a word shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what that relationship means. Sophie's expectations weren't unreasonable. A simple goodbye message, a brief explanation of the decision, some well wishes for the team's continued success. These are basic professional courtesies that anyone leaving any job should extend to their colleagues. But somehow they became too much to ask in this situation. Sophie's willingness to call this out publicly sent a message that professional standards matter and that silence in the face of disrespect isn't acceptable. The grassroots response to Sophie's advocacy has been remarkable to watch. Her podcast sparked a petition demanding changes to WNBA officiating that gathered hundreds of signatures in a matter of days. The league's strategy of using fines to silence criticism completely backfired. Instead, amplifying Sophie's message and turning her into a catalyst for broader fan frustration with league transparency and player protection policies. What we're witnessing here is something much bigger than just one player getting fined for speaking her mind. Sophie Cunningham has become the unfiltered voice for athletes like Caitlin Clark, who are trying to navigate a system that seems more interested in controlling narratives than addressing legitimate concerns about fairness and safety. Her willingness to sacrifice financially for transparency and truth has resonated with fans who are tired of corporate speak and sanitized interviews that reveal nothing meaningful about the real issues facing women's professional basketball. The league now finds itself in an impossible position. Every time they find Sophie, they prove her point about their aggressive suppression tactics. Every time they ignore her legitimate criticisms about officiating or professional standards, they validate fan complaints about their priorities being out of whack. Sophie has essentially created a win-win situation for herself and the causes she supports, while putting the WNBA in a public relations nightmare that gets worse with each heavy-handed response. This story is far from over. And if Sophie's track record tells us anything, it's that she's not going to be intimidated into silence by financial penalties or league pressure. She's found her voice as an advocate for fairness, transparency, and professional standards. And that voice is resonating with fans who are hungry for authentic leadership in women's sports. The WNBA may have thought they were dealing with just another player they could control through fines and intimidation, but they've instead created their own worst nightmare. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for.